Welcome to Unity of Carlsbad. And this is a blessed morning. Each morning is a blessed morning. Let's take a moment for prayer. Dear God, we give thanks that we can find within ourselves the wondrous depth of your peace. We know that each moment is filled with your light. We let that light work in us so that we can be your light of peace in the world. Thank you, thank you, thank you, God. Amen. Well, I give thanks that Reverend Robin and the Board of Unity of Carlsbad had invited me to do the Sunday lesson. So my lesson is titled Uncovering Peace. So I've got a song I'm going to share with you first. This is a song called African Breezes, and I wrote it many years ago when I was serving at the Unity of Merced. And the idea is that there's this breeze, the air that we have, it goes all the way around the world, so we're all connected. Well, 3 years ago, Meredith and I were in Dubrovnik, and the place that we were staying, the lady said, "Oh, you'll be able to smell the breeze from Africa today." And later in the day, in the afternoon, we smelled this rich, earthy smell and spices. And so the African breeze was over there as well. So it's that image of connectedness that we have. African breezes blow by my window. I've seen many faces, all colors, oh, how they glow. So many nations on this tiny planet. Maybe we'll make it this time. There are times when the world goes by so slow. I don't know what to do. I want everyone to be free and jubilant. Why does it take so long? Why can't we see through the differences and know that our hearts are the same? Come on everyone, now's the time to confess that love is your own middle name. There are times when I see radiant souls, happy, joyous, peace within. I behold the paradise in our minds. Now's the time to begin. You and I make a difference. There's no running away. We're just a step away from success. Begin in your own life today. African breezes blow by my window. I've seen many faces, all colors, oh how they glow. So many nations on this tiny planet. Maybe we'll make it this time. We're gonna make it this time. My lesson today is titled Uncovering Peace. And I want to start with inviting you to think about if you've ever been to Unity Village and seen the Peace Chapel there. Let me just get the image up. This is the image in there. And the words that they have there are, "Peace be still." And these words come from a story about Jesus with the disciples. They were out on a boat on the lake, And Jesus was sleeping, and a storm came up, and the disciples were concerned that the boat was going to capsize and they'd all be killed. So they wake Jesus up with a lot of fear. And Jesus stands up and commands the winds and the waves, and he says, "Peace, be still." So that's where those words come from. Peace, be still. And the waves in the story represent the waves of stress that we experience in our lives. And of course, not just us, but everybody around us well. And when we have stress, it's because we're feeling cut off from our good. We're feeling cut off from God's spiritual resources in our lives. And so it's important for us to recognize that we are not cut off. We've just forgotten that we're connected. The 22nd Psalm starts out with the words, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Those are familiar words. Jesus said them on the cross. Some people think that maybe Jesus was reciting the Psalms and he just said that one out loud when he got to there. But it starts out with that sense of being abandoned, but it ends up with this sense of connection that God will see us through. And of course, the next psalm is, "The Lord is my shepherd." And so in order to move from that consciousness of my God, why have you forsaken me, to a consciousness of the Lord is my shepherd, we have to recognize that there are layers of stress, layers of fear, layers of limiting beliefs around that peace, around that truth that is within us, and to break through those, eliminate them, and so that we can live from that peace and in that peace in our world. And so we're looking for relief. I'm going to start the PowerPoint again here. So we're looking for some kind of relief in our lives. And so here's the Bible verse. He wrote and said, "Peace be still," and the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. So we're looking for a sense of relief. We're looking for a sense of peace in our lives. And when we know the truth that God is at the center of our being, then we're no longer looking for that peace. We're no longer waiting for things around us to change in some way, but we're feeling that peace in our lives. And so I invite you to say this with me. I am God's presence of peace. Let's say that together. I am God's presence of peace. And now, as if we really mean it, I am God's presence of peace. So when we establish ourselves in that consciousness, then we have this sense of being a peaceful presence in the world. And we can look around us, and there aren't many allies for peace. Most of the people around us are caught up in all the appearances, and they want to know how put upon they are by COVID and this and that. But I always like to remember that we are the offspring of survivors. We wouldn't be here if our ancestors had not been survivors. So we have not only the physical DNA of survivors, but we also have the mental, emotional, and spiritual DNA of survivors, because we're connected to God and we can overcome. And the message from Spirit is, it will all work out. And so in order for us to experience that, we have to do some work. And what we need to do is we need to uncover that peace that's at the center of our being and be instruments for that peace in the world. So we connect with the peace that is ours, and then from that peace, we bring peace to those around us as well. There are these layers of limiting beliefs, and we can learn to feel that that's not our truth, that we are God's peace in the world. So my acronym today is PRAY. PRAY, P-R-A-Y. And the P of PRAY stands for this: practice the presence. Practice the presence of God. One of the wonderful scriptures from Jesus, John 14:27. In fact, if you haven't read the sections in a while from John, from about John 13 to John 16, wonderful things in there. So Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you, not as the world leaves, as peace." And so again, the peace in the world is sort of a cessation of conflict, where the peace of God is that peace that is within us. And so we need to learn that we have this peace, and we don't need to fight the layers that are covering up, but just go to the core of our being. And Ira Progoff, a wonderful psychologist, had an image. He called it the well in the underground stream. I call it the pool in the underground stream, but it's the same idea. And it's imagining that there's this pool of water, this well, and knowing that underneath it's connected to this deep, deep experience of truth. So I invite you to close your eyes for a moment and just imagine with me that you're looking at this pool of water, seeing your reflection, But then you're breathing and going deeper down and knowing that there's this underground connection of that living presence of spirit that is light and love and joy. And today we're focusing on peace, that there's this presence of peace that is at the core of our being, that is our truth. And so just breathe as a part of that peace that's underneath, that's ever present, that's always there, that's always ready to come up to the surface to feed us, to nourish us, to bless us. So breathe with that peace in the depth and know that it's there. And that's what we want to practice, taking time to practice that depth in our lives. And we'll do that some more in our meditation time. So I invite you to take a breath. And as you breathe in and let go, let the awareness come up behind your eyes and open your eyes when you're ready. So practice the presence. That's such an essential part of this. And then the R in pray stands for recognize and remove the layers of limitation, of fear, of stress that are there. And so this is some conscious work that we do. And I'm working with a businesswoman right now, doing some weekly coaching for her. And she had a meeting coming up, and it was an important meeting, and she had some stress about it and some concern about how it might come out and how things would work out. And so I invited her to shift the way she was thinking about that and to imagine that she was going to be a peaceful presence as she went there, and that others would be connected with God's peace. And so just thinking those thoughts and seeing that. Now, another way to do it is to imagine that your angels go forth as a blessing to that situation as well. But because she shifted who she was when she came to that meeting, it was a different experience than she had worried about. And so when we're able to eliminate that stress, we have more clarity and more peace in our lives. And so if we think of those sediments, how sediments form in nature, there's a layer and another layer and another layer, and it builds up, and sometimes on a volcano, so there's a whole bunch of debris that's on top of that. But the water will erode that and wash that away. And so we think of prayer as being that part of work that we do to erode those layers of limitation that we have in life, and to know that we can have that clarity. And of course, in Unity, we also talk about denials and affirmations. And denials are those releasing statements, those statements that remind us that the things of the world are not eternal. They don't have the power. God is the power, the one presence, the one power in the universe. And so we recognize that denials say, this doesn't last. Doesn't serve me. I release this. I let it go. And then I affirm the truth. I establish in my mind that truth of consciousness. Another aspect of that is forgiveness. I love the translation of the Lord's Prayer, that forgiveness part where it says, unbind me from the cords of limitation and my mistakes, as I unbind others from the way that I hold them to their mistakes. And so forgiveness is that sense of releasing, and it cuts through those layers. It's like that energy of flowing through and breaking through to that core of our being in our lives. And I always like to talk about Charles Fillmore saying that for an affirmation to be effective, we need to say it 2,500 times. And so this is part of the image, that we say that affirmation again and again and again to build that consciousness and to break through those layers so that we know that truth and live from that truth in our lives. But there is a shortcut, and that's what the A in prayer is about. Ask Spirit to work. Ask Spirit to work. I love this phrase, that the law of grace supersedes the law of cause and effect. What is the law of grace? It's God's love, God's unconditional, ever-present, infinite, eternal love. That's for us and for everyone and everything. And in the midst of that grace, we make mistakes, we get into limitation. But as we recognize that that law of grace supersedes that, we can break through. And the image I like to use is that of an airplane. Think of an airplane on the ground. Gravity is pretty much the only thing that's operating for that right now. But once it gets moving, the law of aerodynamics helps it move up. And so that law of aerodynamics doesn't do away with gravity, but it supersedes it for the moment. And so in that same way, what grace does, it supersedes the law of cause and effect. And so the mistakes that we've made, the mistakes that others have made, when we focus on grace and say, God, please help me break through these layers. I know that you can bless me and heal me and work through this. It sort of accelerates that work that we have in life. When I was in seminary at Unity Village, it was a time, this is back in the late 70s, and there was sort of a big upheaval. There's one of my friends calls it a kerfuffle between Unity Village, Unity School of Christianity, and the Association of Unity Churches, as it was called at that time. And there were all kinds of rumors and things going around that the school was going to be canceled and we wouldn't have it anymore. I'd only done 1 year of school and had another year to go. So there was all kinds of stress and all kinds of fear. And so I'd left one of these meetings where all these ramblings were going on. And as I was driving home through this valley, what I noticed was that the trees were sort of swaying in the breeze. And as I looked at them, what I heard through the trees, the voice of God saying, "Don't worry, it'll all work out. Don't worry, it'll all work out." And so I took that to heart, that what God was doing was greater than whatever the appearances of disharmony were, that there was something greater at work there. And it helped me sustain myself emotionally and spiritually through those times of change and times of upheaval, which there are all the times. And if we can think of upheaval in our lives as being sort of Spirit's way of helping break through those things, and things come up for us to let go. Sometimes we look at them, but many times we just say, "No, I don't need that." Release it and let it go and move on. And so that we can say that I am not about limitation. I'm about that truth of Spirit that is within me. So in this process, we're asking Spirit to work, but that means we have to be alert to the stress and say, "All right, God, I'm feeling stressful about this. Help me break through, help me release, help me have a different experience in my life." So practice the presence of peace within you. Recognize and remove the layers of limitation. Ask Spirit to help do the work. And then the last part of this is to remember that you are God's peace in the world. We've all heard the phrase being in the world, but not of the world. And this is the truth. And so it's the idea that God's peace is within us, and we can bring that peace to the world. We're not caught up in the things that are going around us or the things that aren't going on around us. We're living from that presence of God, that presence of peace, and knowing that that's our truth in life. And so the state of mind that we have is this, that I am peace in the midst of whatever. I am peace in the midst of whatever's going on. I am the peace. I'm the peace in the midst of my family. I am the peace in the midst of things at work. I am the peace in the midst of, all of life. And so that helps us shift. But then it helps us we need to have some reminders. So we need to provide ourselves with some reminders to be that peace. And that's why affirmations are helpful to do that. And so let's just look at a couple here. So this is one: peace at the center of my being brings peace to my world. Peace at the center of my being brings peace to the world. Say it with me. Peace at the center of my being brings peace to the world. And maybe do that little hand motion. Peace at the center of my being brings peace to my world. And you can imagine bringing that peace then to the people around you, family, co-workers, neighbors, whatever's going on, the political things that are happening. Peace at the center of my being brings peace to my world. So that's one. Let's say it again. Peace at the center of my being brings peace to my world. So here's another one as well. God is peace in me. I am God's peace in the world. God is peace in me. I am God's peace in the world. Let's say that together. God is peace in me. I am God's peace in the world. So you can see it basically says the same things in two different ways. So these words aren't magic words. You can make up your own affirmations, but it helps to have something to practice. So that as we're standing in line and waiting for something or hoping that something doesn't happen, we can say, God is peace in me. I am God's peace in the world. And so we really see ourselves on that mission. Another thing that you can practice in a physical way is to think about one of the most ancient symbols for God. This goes back thousands and thousands of years. And the symbol is a circle with a point or a dot in the middle. And so in your hand, you can have that sense that here's my world and here's peace at the center. Peace at the center brings peace to my world. God is peace in me. I am God's peace in the world. So you can do that again, whatever's going on, you can just sort of be playing with your hand and doing that dot in the center, that it's peace in you, and then seeing that peace being the circumference of everything that's going on, superscribing all the events, all the people, all the activities. Peace in you brings peace to all those things. So it's a way to help anchor that in our consciousness so that we learn to think from peace and to walk as peace, to talk as peace, to speak as peace, to move in our world as peace becomes the way of being for us. And so again, thinking about this acronym PRAY, P-R-A-Y, practice that presence of peace that is within you. Know that it's there. Spend some time with it. The more time that you spend with it, the more access you'll be to bring it forth. And then recognize and remove those layers of stress, those layers of limitation, and ask God to help do that work, and then practice that you are God's peace in your world. You make that difference in your world. And when we know that truth, then we're no longer again waiting for other people and other things to change. We are that peace. And so let's go one more. Let's go to this. I am God's presence of peace. I am God's presence of peace. Let's say that. I am God's presence of peace. And then going back to this picture of Unity Village Chapel that's underneath there. Practice the presence, recognize and remove the layers of limitation, ask Spirit to do the work, and know that you are God's peace in the world. I am God's presence of peace. So we'll go into a meditation, but let's have a closing prayer here. Dear God, we do give thanks that we can touch that deep peace that you are within us, and know that in that peace, from that peace, as that peace, we are not only blessed, but we are a blessing in the world. We are your presence of peace, and we give thanks. Amen. Well, dear friend, we'll have a song to move us into meditation. To lead us into meditation, I'd like for us to sing God's Love is Deep Within Me. The melody is Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. And the first verse we'll sing is God's love is deep within me, ever satisfying my soul. Then we'll sing God's light is deep within me, and then God's peace is deep within me. So join me if you'd like. God's love is deep within me, ever satisfying my soul. God's love is deep within me, ever satisfying my soul. Now God's light. God's light is deep within me, ever satisfying my soul. God's light is deep within me, ever satisfying my soul. God's peace. God's peace is deep within me, ever satisfying my soul. God's peace is deep within me, ever satisfying my soul. Well, let's take a time for meditation, and I'm going to put that screen of the Peace Chapel in the background here. So I invite you to close your eyes again and just breathe deeply. Breathe deeply as a part of God's peace. And know that you can move from the surface of your life down into the depths of your being. That is that awareness of your oneness with Spirit, your oneness with the infinite presence, and just breathing as a part of that presence and knowing that this is your truth. I am God's presence of peace. I am God's presence of peace. Think those words with me. I am God's presence of peace. In this moment, that peace is our truth. And we know it, that it's not just in this moment, but every moment. But this is the moment that we lay hold of. This moment of peace, this moment of oneness with Spirit. And in our knowingness that we are one with God's peace, we let that peace resonate in us, Peace is not nothingness. Peace is a vibrancy. It's an awareness of connectedness, an awareness of abundance. It's an awareness of the flow of love. It's an awareness of joy. Peace is connected with all those aspects of the divine. So we recognize that peace is a power in us, a power that helps us release the things that are not of peace, helps us let go of those layers of limiting beliefs, limiting ideas, that sense of fear, that sense of stress. I am God's presence of peace. I am God's presence of peace right here, right now. And we let our minds then touch the things of life with that sense of peace. Our family, we say, I am God's presence of peace in my family. I am God's presence of peace in my family. And see everybody feeling and that energy of peace working in their consciousness, working in the way that they see things. And if you work or you volunteer someplace that you're involved with other people, think again these words, I am God's presence of peace. And see your peace being a blessing for the people there. And in our world, in our neighborhood, all around. I am God's presence of peace, knowing that you're connected with God and that everyone's connected with that peace. And seeing your awareness of peace being like an energy of blessing, an energy of healing, an energy of forgiveness, an energy of release that helps everybody connect with the peace that is within them. Because you're focused on peace, you are making a difference for others. I am God's presence of peace. I am God's presence of peace. And let's take those words just into the silence and let ourselves resonate with the truth of God's peace in us and God's peace expressing through us in the silence. I am God's presence of peace. I am God's presence of peace. I am God's presence of peace. And just breathe deeply. Let those words permeate your whole being as you see it permeating everything and everyone around you. This is your truth in each moment. And to know that you can practice that presence of peace, recognize and remove the layers that are not peace, ask God's help in the process, and then you get to be God's peace in the world. What a joy, what a blessing. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Spirit. And so it is. Amen. Well, dear friend, thank you for joining me for this process. This is brought to you by Unity Church of Carlsbad. Here's their website, unitychurchofcarlsbad.org, and their P.O. box. They'd love to have your financial support as well as your prayer blessing. And you can connect with them online. I think there's a way to give online as well. In fact, I know there is a way to give online as well. So again, thank you. Thanks for being a part of this. And remember that you can uncover peace in your world. And so you are a blessing. Let your peace work for others as well. Let's close with our prayer for protection. We'll sing it 3 times through. The first time, the light of God surrounds me, love of God enfolds me, power of God protects me, presence of God watches over me. Wherever I am, God is. Then pick someone to sing it to. The second time, we'll sing the light of God surrounds you. And then the last time, third time, we'll sing it for everybody on the planet. Light of God surrounds us. So let's start with ourselves. The light of God surrounds me. The love of God enfolds me. The power of God protects me. The presence of God watches over me. Wherever I am, God is. Now pick somebody, sing it through. The light of God surrounds you. The light of God surrounds you. The love of God enfolds you. The power of God protects you. The presence of God watches over you. Wherever you are, God is. Now for everybody on the planet, the light of God surrounds us. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Let's sing it again. Wherever we are, wherever we are, God is. One more time. Wherever we are, wherever we are, God is. 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 God is.